Hi everyone. So first question: who here has a domain name? Okay, quite a few. Okay, so at least you know what a domain name is. That's cool. So today I'm gonna speak about how to repatriate your DNS servers because today we all have fancy web interfaces in the cloud, and then you can add the record, and oh, it just works and it pops, which is not necessarily always a good thing. So why do we take the infrastructure back? Because you have people developing like crazy infrastructure, multi-operator load balancers and stuff, so they have their redundant website. They're sure it's up at all times, like it's completely strong, and with many ISPs, everything is strong. And then you look at their DNS setup. I did not want to put blame on companies, so I took the domain name of one of the previous hackerspaces where I was as an example, and you see that these are the DNS servers. So you have the very strong infrastructure, and then you realize that the domain that is used to access said infrastructure depends on two poor little domain name servers somewhere in the same ISP. And that might be a problem because sometimes things go wrong, especially at that one. There is a reason why I took it. Sometimes you get what we call DNS barbecue. And when that happens, well, it is down. So in that situation, you might want to have a little bit more. So how do we repatriate that thing? Because the fancy web interface is easy. Making your own DNS server is complicated. So how does DNS work? So as many people know, when you're using your ISP DNS settings, you might go to some websites, and then you get a web page that says, oh, this is forbidden in your country, you cannot access it. So what do? You change your DNS settings. You go to 8888 or 9999 or 1111, and everyone knows those ones. It's like the magic fix, and oh, change the DNS, right? Well, that part of the DNS is your resolver. It's this part. That thing does all the magic. It will query everywhere in the world and just give you the reply back as, here you go, here is your answer. But it doesn't just work that way. To start, he has to go to the root servers. The root servers, there are 13 of them in the world, controlled by 12 different entities, which became a problem when one of the entities started acquiring 2 of them. But those root servers contained all the TLDs, so .com, .net, etc. And it will point, okay, .be, those are the servers for .be. So when the resolver comes and say, hey, where is .be? It will reply, oh, you can just query a.nsset.be. Those are the TLD servers for .be. Then it will go to the TLD server and say, oh, who is AltF4.be? Where can I find that? And .be will then reply him, okay, .be is this server, hel.af4.be. Send it back. Then he will query my own server and send me, and my server will basically send the entire reply back. There you go, you have the IP, you can access the website. This worked since a very long time, is vulnerable to many things. Basically, one thing already that most people know is the client resolver link that is vulnerable because it's unencrypted. So basically you can alter it. So people invented DNS over TLS or DNS over HTTPS, and a lot of people know that you can set it up in your phone and it works magically. But that doesn't prevent you from another vector of attack which is behind the resolver. There is something that is called the DNS cache poisoning attack. And the DNS cache poisoning attack is basically spamming a DNS server to saying, hey, google.com is that IP. Because at some point, he will have to query google.com. So when his cache expires, he will query google.com and expect a reply. He will not check from when the reply is where the reply is coming, because most of the time it comes over UDP. So when it gets the reply, it will say, there is a reply. You just hijacked the domain name. That happened, I think, around 2006, where someone successfully started doing that, and IETF was like, oh no, that's a problem. So they started developing technology that is called DNSSEC, which basically makes the entire cycle in reverse. So how do you know if the reply you get from the zone server is the correct one? You sign it. You sign it with a key. Okay, so how do you know that this is the correct key? The TLD server knows that this is the correct key because you gave it to him. Okay, but how do we know that the TLD has not been hijacked? The root server knows because he signed the key. Okay, and how do we know about the root server? It's hard-coded. It's basically hard-coded. So you generally have two keys during the signing request. Well, you have four because private key, public key. But there are two types of key that you need to think about. You have the ZSK and the KeySK. ZSK is zone signing key. It will sign your zone, and that key changes often, depending on how you set things up. It will change and rotate to sign your zone. But it's highly impractical to just give that zone to the TLD, because if it changes every 30 days, now you have to connect yourself and tell the registrar, hey, I changed my key. So you sign this key with the KeySK, the key signing zone. And the key signing zone, that's the one you give to your registrar. That way, you go all the way up with two keys every single time. And those keys, well, even the root server needs to rotate them sometime. So although the KSK is hard-coded inside your server, they sign their ZSK that they rotate often, but they need to sign it manually. But at the root server level, it's kind of sensitive, so you don't just do that. So they publish every single ceremony that they make. It's a KSK root signing key ceremony. It's very boring to watch. It's very long. It's an 8-hour live stream with everything filmed. Like everything. They show the saves, they show the procedure, all the procedure is online, all the OSs that they use on the computers is online. Everything can be audited and they publish it in advance. They audit everything. You can follow everything if you want. That happens like every 3 months or so, and that basically ensures that your DNS stays safe if you implement it. So after that, yeah, I'm at this slide basically. Okay, so after the key sign, one thing you will see is you have to choose your algorithm. You can choose algorithms based on what is standardized. There are a lot of them. The industry basically has decided to use mostly two. So Algo 8, Algo 13. Algo 8 is RSA SHA-256 and Algo 13 is post-quantum ECDSA curve P256 with SHA-256. The industry is kind of transitioning to that. From what I remember, they planned to rotate the key from the root DNS, which is Algo 8, to Algo 13 at the end of 2026. So that will happen. Got information from DNS Belgium through other means that it might happen for DNS Belgium at the end of 2025. So the industry is slowly moving. Most domains don't implement it, which is a problem. But for the rare domains that implement it, some do not always correctly implement it, and some implement algorithms that are not very standard, like Algo 1, which has been deprecated because RSA and MD5. So people say it's weak. Yes. What is your threat model? Do you expect someone with governance skills to hijack your zone? Or do you expect the little script kiddie to basically try and annoy you? Because if there is even Algo 1, it's sufficient to deter the script kiddie. He won't be able to touch it. It's too complicated. But it's generally a bad idea to use those algorithms because of the chain, basically. You have the chain of all the DNS systems, and they need to be compatible. If there is a bug and you use something that is not common, it might take a while to get fixed or even to get noticed. If you use the algorithm that everyone uses and there is a bug, they will catch it really fast. So Algo 8, Algo 13, basically the good idea to use for your algorithms. How to know now what every single TLD use as algorithm? You can check it yourself, or I made a little website. There is the URL, where it basically makes statistics about well, the working of different TLDs. You can see if they have AirDAP, which is the evolution of WHOIS. You can see what algorithm they're using. Sometimes there is none, so no security available for you, go away. And basically there is not really a use to go above and beyond, like using Algo 13 on your zone. If the TLD only does Algo 8, it's a chain of trust. So the security will be as weak as the weakest point in the chain. So if it's Algo 8, you go Algo 13, cool, It will take a little bit more processing, won't really be as useful. Might be future-proof the day they roll out, and also Algo 13 has a shorter key, so the traffic goes faster. If you have fiber optic, does it really matter? That's up to your choice. So, how do we bring this back? We're gonna use bind. Bind is for Berkeley individual naming daemon, I think something like that. And this and it's managed by the ISC, Internet System Consortium. Why bind and not something like PowerDNS? PowerDNS is also free software. You also have NOT that is maintained by cz.nic, which is also a very popular choice. I prefer going for bind because they respect their RFCs to the letter. They were basically there when the entire system got conceived, and they followed everything to the letter based on RFCs. Because when you look at PowerDNS, they have a lot of fancy stuff, like the alias stuff. Oh, nice, we have an alias stuff. It's like a C name, but not a C name. Okay, it's supposed to be standardized. So if someone uses bind and you send him an alias, he's gonna be, okay, what do I do with that? So you want to be as standard as possible in this thing. And you can contribute to it, like the project is very known. At some point they wanted to go to bind 10. That did not happen. So we are still on bind 9, and bind 10 has become a meme inside the industry because it's a kind of project that goes to a dead end and never goes anywhere, sadly. Maybe we'll get there one day, but it became a meme that way. The configuration is not that hard. Most of you have already seen a zone file. It looks kind of like this. So basically you have the @ that's the root of your domain. You have to have a SOA record, which tells on the first field, this is your authoritative name server. That's his name. This is an email address. So after when you get to the domain, here you're supposed to replace by @. That's how it was written. You have your serial number. Every time you change your, every time you make any change, if you want it to be taken into account, you need to increment that serial number. That tells the system, hey, there is a newer version of the zone. And then on that, you contain all the rest of the data, your own records, your A, your quad A, your C names, your TXTs. And that's basically your zone config. It's kind of easy. That's what is hosted by every single DNS that hosts your domain name. Then from that, yes, that's this one. From that, that's your config. You tell him, this is the file, you are the master. So that's the server that manages the entire thing. You can allow transfer. That's very important because you never want to have only one server. If it fails, you lose everything. You need at least 2. So you will have to have a slave server. That slave server needs to know your zone. And you will not just go and edit it manually. It will transfer the zone, an EXFR transfer. It will take the entire zone and push it to the new one. Well, it will not really push it. It will just send a notification. That's why you say also notify. Just send the notification to the slave server to tell, hey, there was a change. Then the slave server will say, okay, I'm pulling the zone back, and now the new zone is deployed. Those are the important parts. Then if you want to add DNSSEC, you can add those parts underneath it, but with this, it will already work. The DNSSEC, those were the settings that I added inside the byte config. It makes it easier, so I can, instead of putting this inside every zone file, I say, hey, take algo 8, take algo 13. It will take its parameters and just do the thing. And auto-sign, every time I make a change, it will just sign and push. So basically, mostly deploy and forget. Should you do that? Yeah, realistically, you don't really want to manage it. It's much better than doing nothing. If you are ICANN, maybe not, but you're not ICANN, so good enough. From there, this is the slave config. Like, it's very, very, very small. What you have to see is basically the same thing. It's slave, and it says you allow the notification from that server, because you don't want some jackass on the internet sending a notification to tell, hey, there is a new zone, and then the server saying, oh yeah, I'm going to import that thing. So you have to whitelist it and say you only listen to that server, and then you only transfer from that server. What is interesting with the slaves is you can also make them appear as masters to other server, and basically making it recursive. So you have one slave that is outside of your network, that is public facing. Your master might be a little Raspberry Pi at home. You send it to VPSs in the cloud, and then those ones will look at, oh, we are the absolute masters of the zone, and then push it to other slaves, because you can have slaves like Hurricane Electric that provides free ones worldwide, which allows you to have multiple ISPs that host your zone. So now if someone wants to take down your little domain name, you have to nuke 2 ISPs at the same time. Otherwise, the domain stays up. I went down to 3. And so now basically, this part has been redundant between multiple ISPs. So you can still lose this part, but you cannot really do much about it. What you can do is start doing with basically multiple domain names for every single domain server. If you want to go really extreme, having a different TLD on every single name server, so you're sure that at least one stays up, even if you lose the entire TLD. Now that your setup has been deployed, what you need to do is to go to your registrar page and tell him, now you point to these name servers. Your new name servers, you point to them, and now the entire DNS will just send the traffic to them. The DNS sec, you have to copy your key. That will be in your zone, so the TLD can say, okay, this is valid. I validate the entire thing. And the glue records, this is something that a lot of people tend to forget. But if you host your own domain name servers, like you have your domain name server and you take, you have your domain name and you take ns1.yourdomain, ns2.yourdomain, that's fine. How do you make the initial resolution to know who is ns1 and ns2? Because there you never get to the domain name servers. They cannot resolve themselves. That's what the glue record is for. The glue record basically creates a copy of those records of your name servers inside the zone of the TLD. So they can resolve to your domain with your domain without knowing your domain name servers at that point. Very important, because sometimes you don't deploy them and it works because you have some servers that will actually resolve it for you. And then one day those server goes down and the entire zone is flat. So don't forget the glue records. And from there, well, basically now you can see with DNS, you can see all the name servers that are already in the domain name server. These are now your authoritative servers. It has been deployed. And now you can flex the zone master because you have everything green. And you can make a test with your own domain name. You go on the zonemaster.net, you run a little test, and it will tell you basically everything that is wrong with your domain name. There's probably something, because the thing is very, very picky. But yeah, well, if you follow that, basically assume you followed best practice. Are there any questions? Yes?
What does glue record mean? Why is it called glue?
No idea. It's
Repeat the question. Repeat the question.
Oh,
No, Arnold.
What does a glue record means? I have no idea what it means. I know what it does. It's probably an abbreviation. It's probably somewhere into an obscure RFC that has been written like 20 years ago. So I have to look it up. Anyone else? Yes?
the DNS sec policy, it had like algo 8 and algo 13 between, like in a string. Is that just a name, or is that actually like a hard-coded thing that gets switch cased somewhere and it's like, oh, it's that?
So the question was, the policies for DNSSEC mentioned algo 8 and algo 13 into quotes. This is indeed a string. This is the name of basically a template that you can use. Instead of repeating the same configuration over and over and over again inside your configuration, you can put that in a template in under a name, and then mention that name inside your config for all the zones you need. Instead of having a very long config that always replicates the same thing, you can have the same template, and the same way, if you change one setting in the template and you reload it, it will refresh for all the things that have that policy underneath it.
So you can also call it something like George.
Yeah, you can call it like you want.
Oh, okay.
You can call it George, no problem. Other questions? Okay, then I guess it's done then.